So we always put the little disclaimer there just because YouTube's harassment policies are very, very strict, and also the few people who are insane and sad enough to actually harass someone are not going to get a pass from yours truly to do so. But today we are talking about an article published by Game Rant. Actually, I believe it was less than 24 hours ago when I'm talking about it now. And I want to say that before we get into it, I actually think this is a very well-reasoned article and it presents a good argument, but I fundamentally disagree with it, and that is that Assassin's Creed's modern games may have to say goodbye to an iconic tool. Now, the entire premise of this article is basically about the Hidden Blade itself, its applicability to the Assassin's Brotherhood from Assassin's Creed, and also just how it works. Now, before we hop into it, I know this is the second AC video in a row, but I hadn't tackled the topic in a while, so I did want to kind of come back swinging on it and talk about it a little bit, and I thought this would be fun. Also, pretty soon, I'm going to be starting up again with more James Bond videos, and also Fallout again, so if you're interested in those topics, please be sure to keep checking out the channel, leave a like, subscribe, and come back, because I appreciate seeing you here. Just been a very busy, probably month, I would say, here as well. So, this article is really essentially about how the Hidden Blade is the key tool of the Assassin's Brotherhood. I'm not going to read you every piece of the article. I think it's actually worth reading on its own because, like I said, it is well reasoned out and also intelligently written, but the person who wrote this does know their history about the Hidden Blade, going over some of the iconic targets of the Hidden Blade, such as King Xerxes I, Bartholomew Roberts, and Charles Lee. Now, somewhere a Connor just cringed hearing the name Charles Lee, but not coming out of his mouth, so we're going to move on very quickly. But essentially, the key argument here is that even though this tool was very, very useful, the Hidden Blade itself, in the old times of the Assassin's Brotherhood, leading up towards modern day, there have been a lot of flaws in the design of it, and maybe it's time to be retired. Now, I want to tell you what is kind of reasoned here and why I disagree with it. I don't want to just tear down a straw man. I want to kind of tell you what's actually said here a little bit without just reading their whole article. So the writer goes into the history of the Hidden Blade and also how it works. I mean, you all know how it works, but essentially the TLDR is that it is a retractable blade held on your wrist. In the past, you needed to lose your ring finger in order to use it, but now you don't need to. Obviously, Altair changed that using the knowledge he acquired from the Apple of Eden. And I completely agree with that assessment. Obviously, that is just the history of the tool and completely true. Now, one thing that they did mention, though, is that originally this was used as sort of a sign of devotion to the Hidden Blade, which is true, but that later on that was kind of deemed unnecessary and fixed. Again, true. But they did talk a little bit about the improvements of the design over time, including things like the Phantom Blade and the Hook Blade, or even the Pivot Blade, saying that the blade has had to be changed over time and updated to fit different eras of history. The argument then kind of comes down to the fact that even though these different updates to the Hidden Blade, and I quote, make it more versatile, they cannot compare to more modern advancements. The best example of this is the Hidden Gun, which was the first fictional use of a firearm in the AC universe. The Hidden Gun may have provided the Italian assassins like Ezio Auditore with a ranged advantage, but it wouldn't stack up against the firearms found in Desmond Miles' time. A gun that can shoot multiple bullets without having to reload is far better than a single-shot weapon like the Hidden Gun. Even if the Hidden Gun was remade for modern times, the fact that it needs to be housed in a bracer or gauntlet to remain stealthy makes its firepower inferior to a conventional gun. The argument essentially goes on to say that unless the Brotherhood themselves can use another piece of Eden or something like that to update its design to become more modern, that its outdated design makes it more sentimental than practical, listing a lot of assassins that have used other weapons to kill that they prefer over the Hidden Blade. And now this is the crux of the argument I want to get into. I understand the idea that essentially times have changed, right? So what I think a lot of the idea is getting down to is just basically modern technology. And we've seen this a lot of times. There's a huge difference between using a smartphone from 2009 or 2010 and using a smartphone from 2023. There's a lot of technological advancement there, right? I think the difference here is the applicability of what we are talking about, which is a weapon. I mean, if knives have gone out of style, somebody needs to call the United Kingdom, because our pals, the lobsterback descendants, are getting torn apart out there by shankings, okay? They are definitely using a lot of knives, despite the fact that guns and other things exist in the real world. It's not always about what is the most modern weapon when any weapon can kill. We see this in the prison system, where a shank itself is basically regarded as a nuke, okay? Like, when you are put in different situations, what you have has different amounts of value. And so for me, what I think this comes down to is not eliminating the hidden blade, is not moving past it and getting rid of it because it's sentimental, but rather updating the design to fit modern times, or updating it in different ways to work for different people. For example, Desmond himself uses a hidden blade quite a bit in Assassin's Creed 3. I actually really like the modern day segment sections of Assassin's Creed 3. I think they're put together very well, and they're very interesting, even though they are extremely linear, and also they do work a little bit as a tech demo to show us that the idea of a modern day assassin could still work. Again, we also see something similar in Watch Dogs Legion with the Assassin's Brotherhood, despite Ubisoft's constant toying with us and trying to say, no, we made this, but it's not canon every time they cross these two series over. Regardless, I do think it's still an interesting little aside. One of the things that the hidden blade is most useful for is stealth. This is something that is touched upon in the article, but I kind of want to go into a little more. Yes, of course you will have assassins that grow up differently, that have different favored ranged or melee weapons, but that does not mean that they need to eliminate and get rid of the hidden blade itself. Sometimes a very simple tool is all you need to complete a job. And while I do agree with the idea that a modern melee weapon or even a modern gun is more powerful technically than a hidden blade, there's a couple things to tackle here. First off, we are not yet in the modern setting of Assassin's Creed, and it doesn't really seem like Ubisoft wants to go there. They toyed with the idea several times with Desmond and also with Layla, but they won't really take us there for a full game. So until I see that happen, I don't think this is much of a problem regardless. However, even if it was, Desmond in the modern day sections of Assassin's Creed uses a hidden blade to much effectiveness, even breaking into the Abstergo building itself. I think if anything, something that you would have to do with a modern hidden blade is just downsize the size of the gauntlet a little bit so that it can actually fit comfortably under something like a sweatshirt. Now, of course, you're not going to walk down the road wearing Ezio Auditore's outfit or wearing Connor's outfit from Assassin's Creed 3 as an assassin. You would stick out like a sore thumb in the modern day world. But if we were going to the modern day world, which I still don't see happening, but if we were, I do think that the hidden blade is still extremely useful just because of how it can actually be hidden. That's kind of the whole point of it. When you're getting into actual combat, like I'm talking hand-to-hand combat, it would still be useful, but if somebody pulls a gun on you, you're probably going to have some problems in modern day. However, if you're not getting into those situations, which assassins try not to in general get into full-on broken-out combat, they try and remain stealthy. If you are avoiding those full-on broken-out hand-to-hand close-range combat sessions, you're going to be able to use the hidden blade very well, as long as it can be concealed under a piece of clothing. I also wanted to mention the fact that the article mentions that essentially the hidden blade itself had a lot of inferior design problems, and because of that, it had to be updated several times into things like the hook blade, the phantom blade, etc. One of my favorites being the hook blade. I absolutely love Revelations. And kind of going off of that as a bit of a show that, hey, look, this thing has had to be updated so much and changed so much depending on where you are, that maybe it's not actually that useful. And one of the reasons I disagree with that is that I think the versatility of being able to update the hidden blade so much, to change the hidden blade into a phantom blade, to change the hidden blade into a hook blade, things like that, I think that those show just how useful this tool is, because at the end of the day, this is a tool. It needs to be modified depending on the time and place that you are at. This is not the key be-all end-all weapon. An assassin who chooses to use the hidden blade in a scenario where a sword or a gun would be better is a fool. They're going to die, right? But an assassin who chooses to use a gun in a situation where a hidden blade would be better is also a moron. Obviously, in modern day, if you're walking up to someone with an Uzi, or you're walking up to someone with a rifle, people are going to be able to see that, even if it is a superior weapon, and you will immediately be taken out, especially in an assassination situation. You also have to remember that Abstergo themselves have really upgraded and updated their methods in a lot of ways and have access to a lot of powerful technology, so just approaching them with brute force is not going to be something that ever gets the Brotherhood really anywhere. The Brotherhood, especially in modern day times, does not have the numbers to engage the Templars in a full-on war, in a full-on, full-scale battle. We even see that in games like Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, and 3, where there's a lot of mentions of other assassin safe houses being compromised by the brute force and sheer power of Abstergo and the Templars. These are not enemies that you can go at with a rifle. These are not enemies that you can go at with a bazooka. These are enemies that will see those things coming. Basically, the key feature, the key, strength of the Brotherhood of Assassins is stealth. And the Hidden Blade definitely encompasses and personifies that strength for the Brotherhood. If the Brotherhood were to ditch that strength and go more towards other technology, I truly believe it would be a lot easier to figure out who they are. Imagine if you said, well, maybe they should go with switchblades instead of a hidden blade. You're going to be fumbling around in your pocket trying to take this thing out and stab somebody? Or are you just going to approach them stealthily in a crowd, very crowded area, the hidden blade comes out, boom, done, walk away, that kind of thing. This is definitely, I think, a tool that is not limited by the time period it's in. The main limiter is the size. I think that's the one thing that would need to be updated a little bit, because, for example, when Desmond himself is using a hidden blade, I would argue it's a little bit conspicuous in modern times compared to what the game acts like it is, and I do think that the Brotherhood could do a better job of minimizing that size and actually toning that down a little bit, so that it was easier for people in the Brotherhood to move around undetected while still using the hidden blade. I do also think that when you start getting into modern day, I guess I would say, concerns with the Brotherhood, you start having some problems anyway. We're at the point with things like the TSA and other organizations and even metal detectors, where you can pretty much walk through them, and even if you had that little piece of metal hidden blade on you, people could tell that you have that on you, right? So I guess the question comes down to, what weapon could you replace the hidden blade with? And personally, I think that there could be variants of the hidden blade as well. Now, I would not call this the plastic blade. I think that's very, very boring and stupid sounding, but I do want to draw your attention to the fact that there are essentially plastic guns, or guns made of plastic polymers, in order to get around security situations in real life. Now, I'm not going to go tell you how to find those. I'm not going to go encourage you to buy them. I'm sure they're illegal in a lot of places. I don't know the law and the ins and outs of that. I do know criminals don't care about legality though. And when it comes down to it, I do think that something similar could be done with the hidden blade, where maybe you have sort of a version of it that's not metal based, but based on something else, whether that be something simple like really sharp stone. I don't know how you would make that contraption work, but maybe someone in the comments could talk about it, or even another polymer or material that is not metal based that could not be detected by modern security. I do think that those kinds of things are arguments that could certainly be made for changing the hidden blade itself in order to get around modern security, but I do think the idea that the assassins should escalate themselves to having more deadly weapons and more noticeable weapons, because that's essentially what would happen, I do think that that would get in the way of the Assassin's Brotherhood functioning, and it already has a hard time functioning as it is. It can never get quite enough members, it can never gain quite enough ground, and I truly think that ditching one of the best weapons and tools at its arsenal would be a huge mistake. Now, in a closing thought, I think it's definitely up to every assassin in canon to use their discernment as to what weapon works where. Obviously, Edward himself in Assassin's Creed 4 is not going to be pulling out the hidden blade in a situation where a sword works better, just as, of course, you and I would not use a knife to eat our steak instead of using a fork and a knife, right? Or we wouldn't use a fork to eat ice cream on purpose when we could use a spoon. Those kinds of things are decisions that I think you have to think about as you play the games, but also the assassins in canon would have to think about in order to get their jobs done and not die. Every tool has its place. and has its purpose. Just as you would not use the handle end of a screwdriver to beat a nail into the wall on purpose instead of choosing a hammer, it doesn't mean that the screwdriver is worthless, right? Obviously, when you have to screw in a screw, you use the screwdriver, you don't just hammer it in with the hammer. I think that the Assassin's Brotherhood's tools and their weapons are the same way. Different things work for different people, just as, for example, a rope dart weapon would not necessarily work on Desmond's mission to the Abstergo building. It does work for Connor in the Frontier during colonial America. And those are decisions and thoughts that I think every assassin, and also by extension every player, would have to make while playing these games, instead of just saying, well, one shouldn't exist, we should get rid of it. Now, I do recommend you check out this article. It's not too often that I read one of these articles that I fully disagree with the idea of, but that is very well reasoned. It actually makes me think. So I definitely thank the author for that. I thought it was very good. The link is in the description down below if you want to read it. It's fairly new and I think it's a good read. But let me know what you think in the comments down below about today's video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Again, more Assassin's Creed, more Batman, obviously, of course, he's not going anywhere. Spider-Man, DC, Marvel, James Bond, Fallout, it's all coming up on the channel, so I appreciate you sticking around. Have a fantastic day. And finally, if you have not checked it out yet, Jill and I put up a very, I think, good video about Pokemon Stadium over on her channel that basically talks about all the problems that the Nintendo Switch has had with porting some of these games, dropping features, especially that one. So I highly recommend you check that out if you're interested. The link is in the description down below. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.